So hello, everyone, and welcome back. For those of you that are returning, welcome to those of you who are attending for the first time. But this is Claris Engage 2020. I am your co-host, Janine Campbell, and we are thrilled that you could join us for the conference this year. We have a great panel for this last panel of the day. So we will be digging into the low-code boom in this panel, moderated by Stephen Nellis of Reuters. And I will pass to Stephen in a minute, but before we do that, we want to make sure that you have the best experience today with WebEx, so I want to share a few tips with all of you. We highly recommend that you listen to today's WebEx using your computer audio, but if you have any issues and you'd like to dial in by phone, you can easily do that. You would hover over the WebEx screen where you see the bubble with the 3 horizontal icons. That is where you would click and be able to change your audio connection very easily. There are phone numbers that will be provided for you internationally. Additionally, if you have any technical issues or require WebEx technical support, we have dropped the technical support phone number and contact information in the chat. We also highly recommend that you shut down other applications that may draw bandwidth during today's session. Additionally, we have disabled the two-way chat to minimize distraction to our panelists, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions. And I do also want to say that we have exceeded capacity with WebEx, and we are thrilled about that. But some of you may experience some video issues seeing some of the panelists. Again, it shouldn't affect any of your audio, and you should be able to hear, and we are recording these sessions for view at later time. So with that, let me just remind you all how to ask questions. It's very simple. You hover over the bubbles at the bottom of the WebEx screen, select the question bubble, and it will open the Q&A panel to the right of the WebEx window. I ask that you send questions directly to me, and then I will pass them to our moderator, Stephen, and we will do our best as time allows at the conclusion of this panel discussion to take a few audience questions. So please go ahead and submit your questions. And finally, the last housekeeping note, and that is that you have the freedom to choose how you view our panelists and our speakers today. You're seeing grid view here on this screenshot, but if you'd like to change it to see the individual speaking in a full screen view, you can do that. You hover over the circle with the 4 boxes in it, and it'll allow you to change the view of our speakers and panelists to whatever you prefer for today's session. And with that, I am thrilled to pass the virtual mic to Stephen Nellis from Reuters for exploring the low-code boom. Stephen, take it away.
Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us here at this panel on exploring the low-code boom. As Janine mentioned, I'm Stephen Nellis with Reuters. I cover technology from the San Francisco Bureau and have always kept my eye on the enterprise space and very excited to be here with you today. So the topic of conversation in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of low-code development. But because of this boom, there's a lot of players coming into the space now, and it's kind of hard for both users and businesses to really understand what is low code. I mean, in some contexts, what we might think of as very advanced developer tools are labeled this. In other contexts, it's something just a little more than drag and drop. So given Claris's history in this space, I'm really excited to get the chance to talk through some of these issues today. Joining us are Brad Freitag, the CEO of Claris, Jordan Watson, Managing Director of Solis Digital, Garrett Reedy from Booz Allen Hamilton, and Taylor Erickson from Safeguard Medical. So gentlemen, I think the best place to start here is because this term has become so expansive so recently, be a good place is to go through with each of you and just say, how do you define what is low code? What do we mean by that phrase? Brad, maybe we'll start with you.
Great. Well, first of all, Stephen, thanks for moderating today, and to Garrett, Jordan, and Taylor, thrilled to be on this panel with you. It'll be a lot of fun. So starting with your question, what is low code? Low code is really mere mortals being able to deploy software. There are phrases about software is eating the world, but we need helpers. We need more people who can do it. And our, really our purpose for 30 years has been helping you create better ways to work and you know, that's transitioning more and more to buzzwords around digital transformation, moving from analog, moving from paper to digital. But we can get these tools in the hands of many more people than just the computer science graduates, which are you know, so scarce every year.
Garrett, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, I think low code really, it rests in the considerable real estate that resides between very advanced coding systems, such as the big data systems, and really the macros or kind of low-level code that all of us may be performing on our desktops. I think the real difference with low code is that it enables coders to be embedded in some of the teams that are actually developing and utilizing these actual applications. So it provides the opportunity to leverage the technology while not necessarily being a pro coder.
Jordan, any thoughts from you?
I think, as we've alluded to before, I think from a marketing perspective and from a press perspective, I think everybody, all the big players have jumped into the low code space, and a lot of things are being labeled as low code, and I think they're being labeled as low code because somebody's produced something that was easier to do than doing it from scratch before. So I think the term low code is all context specific. I think specifically in our space, I would define anything as low code, which allows us to start a conversation about understanding a problem, rather than having to start a conversation from a technical point of view. So I think anything which is defined as low code should be aiming to allow us to start with what is your problem, rather than having to start with what's your IT landscape or what technology do you have in your business.
And then Taylor, from your perspective?
Excellent. Obviously, all of those are great answers. I mean, the one thing that I think is unique is low code isn't a new fad buzzword. Essentially, it's essentially what I think it is the next logical abstraction layer. And so, you know, that's software that takes high-level requests and translates them into low-level commands to perform a task. It's just that with this growth and the abundance of technology of what's happening, it's becoming pervasive, and you get the consumerization of IT and everyone getting more and more tied to their phones and apps. And now there's this desire and ability to go from an idea to value extremely quickly with low code.
And that's actually maybe a good place, either Taylor or for you, Jordan, since you kind of mentioned this concept of starting with the problem rather than the technology. How did we get here? How did low code kind of come about? Where did it emerge from originally? You know, I know Claris has been around for a very long time, but you know, this thing has just sort of mushroomed up. So how did we get here to this point where we're at a sort of inflection point with the technology?
Yeah, maybe I'll start that one and then go to you, Jordan. I think, you know, technology's been just at this Moore's Law double pace, you know, but the thing about Moore's Law is it's just applied to the transistor, the microprocessor, and but that's fundamentally happening in all these areas of technology. So we're seeing exponential growth in all aspects of technology, but right now, and what's particular is this convergence of all these exponential technologies, and add to that the API economy and the rapid growth of APIs. And you add to that equation the low code platform to stitch those together, and it just becomes unrelentless. It allows you to focus on really the true value add, the thing that is going to make your idea and concept unique and different and value added for the business or the startup or whatever it is you want to do, and not have to worry about things like, how do I sign on? How do I serve it up? How do I store? How do I, communicate, the packet switch and all that stuff? All of that is handled. And so you can really focus on the time to value.
Yeah, I think Taylor, adding on to that, I think that it's been the term low code or the positioning being a strong position in the marketplace, which has boomed. I think it's just a natural progression of the way that both society and technology has been moving for a long time. In 1990, you went to get a printer, and it was a whole specialist that needed to come up to set up your printer, right? It wasn't something that now you can just go. In fact, there's arguably, do you need a printer? But nowadays it's you go and buy it in a shop, you plug it in, it works, it connects to the Wi-Fi. Like everything's moving to this. Let's just focus on solving the problem, and I think that's a natural progression for the coding space. That historically we've seen, specifically in our industries, we've seen this pressure growing on businesses, both small and large, for different reasons. Large businesses are getting the pressure because, as Brad alluded to, that digital transformation is separating winners from losers, and they have to play catch up really quickly. And again, as Brad alluded to, there isn't an abundance of full stack developers that you can just go and get 500 people and throw them at an enterprise organization and allow them to churn the wheel very quickly and speak to business. So there's been this gap of as far as we've seen, of big business and small business needing to feel more control over their own destiny, or at least being able to set the wheels in motion to prove that there is something there, without necessarily the reliance on having to spin up huge teams in organizations to just move the needle a little. But I think it's been a long time coming. I just think now is or it has been over the previous couple of years, the pinch point has come where people have promised the markets and business does need to change because now it is separating winners from losers in big industries.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and maybe I could flip that over to Brad. Why now? Why the past 18 months or so, and what kind of people are you seeing jump into low code? What kind of businesses and people that you haven't seen before that have suddenly kind of into it over the past 18 months?
Yeah, Stephen, I think the backlog has become so massive for consulting firms, IT organizations, the operations themselves. I would calculate it in years. I think when Jordan and I were talking earlier this week, he had one organization that calculated their backlog in decades, which is to say, there's 700,000 in the U.S. alone. There are 700,000 IT jobs available today. In the past year in the U.S., there were 70,000 computer science graduates. There's such a scarce supply of trained, skilled resources. You look at any other job function, marketing, operations, sales, finance. All of those people need to participate in bringing competitive advantage to their organization, and much of that is going to happen through technology, through digital transformation, through software. So to the extent we can engage those people, we can onboard and certify them in 15 months, about a third of the time it takes to go through a computer science degree. Those people immediately add relevance. There's 140% premium in income for a computer science graduate over any other job today. And so if we can increase the premium for people in every other job function to participate that way, there's strong economic incentives. But again, I think to your point, why now? Why recently? There has to be a better way, right? It's just that the demand is there.
Yeah, Garrett, I'm wondering if you could weigh in on that too. You work for a very big big organizations. So curious, what you're seeing there in terms of or among big organizations that you all work with about, big backlogs and trying to look at ways to solve some of these bottlenecks.
Absolutely. I think low-code software, it really provides organizations and non-traditional developers, business users, end users, mission owners, it provides them with the opportunity to develop and configure workflows and applications under their control. So anywhere where there's pockets or sets of data, as we're finding, that's passed or leveraged between different segments of even a larger process, there's an opportunity for low code to automate things, to provide better data capture, which is the new currency, and to really improve processes from a level that is down in the organization and at the level that business is being conducted for the team that's using that system or application. So I think those customizations and benefits really allow, again, even a larger organization, the individual or smaller pockets or teams that exist inside of those, to really improve their smaller processes, which all add to a bigger whole.
Great. And, we're doing this panel virtually because we're in the midst of a pandemic. And since we're doing it virtually, by the way, I would just like to take a moment to recognize Jordan, who is up very late in the United Kingdom. So thank you, Jordan. I hope there's a cup of coffee there. But it does bring up a question that I wanted to ask everybody. I think as a ton of people have shifted to working and learning from home, certainly almost every organization has discovered gaps in their information technology infrastructure they didn't know they had. And so I'm wondering how, even though this is a longer trend of the past couple of years or 18 months that we're talking about, are there any specific effects you've seen from the pandemic of how it's driven this? All of a sudden saying, oh, we've got to empower business units to fix this, that, or the other because we've just got too many things going on. Just what effects are folks seeing from the pandemic? And I'll just toss that out there to anybody who wants to open up with it.
Well, this is Garrett. I'll start. I found that it's really opened the door for the need for it, and need that necessity kind of guides what people will go towards. So it no longer is the, hey, I can walk down the hall and pop into people's offices. It's no longer I can have a quick stand-up meeting where we just go around the table. It's a little bit more difficult with WebEx and other technologies. So automating those processes, finding ways to collectively get everyone together using those tools and technologies that can supplement what we've lost as a result of the impact of COVID to the average workplace. I think those are really some tangible benefits that can be immediately realized by the folks that are now in this situation.
Yeah, I'd add to Garrett's point. The pandemic has really surfaced very obvious priorities, and whether it's collaboration or communication, because you can't do a stand-up in person anymore, those priorities have to be dealt with. I think it was Andrew LeCase who called it a forcing function. It is surfacing like key problems that have to be solved right now, and if they can be solved, they will. And I think it's changed work. It's also it's made low code relevant in many cases that it probably could have gone through politics and deliberation that would have delayed it in the past.
Yeah. Taylor, Jordan, anything from either of you on that one?
Yeah, I think just interject on that one. I think from what we've seen on the ground, I think that there has almost been years worth. I mean, you couldn't quantify it, but there are years worth of transformations just purely culturally that organizations of all sizes have gone through. We've worked with organizations which 3 months ago were saying that the transformation to cloud was in their 3 to 5 year plan ahead, and given 6 weeks, now you speak to everybody and they're using shared documents and they're all communicating. So there has been this huge transformation, and it's that transformation's great because it allows platforms like Claris and consultancies like ourselves to find our place in this new world, as we can see organizations that we can help. but it is also making some of the issues that already pre-existed inside organizations, it brings them to the forefront. It almost magnifies them or amplifies them, so that something that you could, an inefficiency you could get away with by walking a piece of paper 10 yards down the office to drop on somebody else's desk, that's now a huge problem, that you can't do that in an organization. So what we've seen is this cultural change has been fantastic, because it's allowing people to realize that you don't have to spend 2 hours of your life commuting to and from work, or even to a meet. You don't have to spend 4 hours commuting to have a 30-minute conversation with a customer. So they're the positives. I think that some of the negatives, or some of the challenges that people are working through, is just trying to find what this new way of working actually means for their processes. And the technology and how they fix that with technology may come and may support it. But I think they first got to work out, how does this new landscape work for the business, and what are the challenges now that weren't before. But as far as we can see, customers of well, like all enterprises, organizations, you have to adapt and evolve quickly in order to stay on top, and that's what people are doing on the ground.
Taylor, was there anything from your end on that one?
Yeah, it's hit us in a lot of those similar ways, and I'd say, putting on my IT hat, it's been nice. It has been a quickening function in that this idea of remote working became mandatory, and now it's sitting back and assessing and realizing, okay, that can be very productive, and in a lot of ways it's strengthening partner relationships. So I'm not out there from a IT standpoint. I'm looking to scale a company to double its size in the next couple of years, while having a very limited IT staff, and having what I'd call evangelists that are out there engaging the business in the right way to become citizen developers, and then having partners enable that to happen. And and so the pandemic has really contributed towards the viability of that model, and we're seeing that it can be done, all during this pandemic. It's been really nice.
Sorry, just to interject on that. I do think that's worth potentially raising off the back of that the phrase low code, or previously it was rapid application development platforms, or that whole space. Sometimes it can be inferred or implied by the term low code that it's almost less easy and then it's low value. But actually, what we've seen during this period is actually there's more value attributed to having that speed and that agility, because customers and businesses can't wait 3 months or 6 months. They don't have that luxury to wait. So I think sometimes the wider market and people sometimes approach that term of low code and think that's almost taking the value away from what we do as a community or as a platform. And I think what it actually only does is it amplifies the value rather than moving it away. Because we're saying, well, we don't have to have a conversation necessarily about security and SecOps and encryption. Why? Because you pay a license fee for that, and that's what Claris are there for. They allow us to just jump straight in. But again, I think too often that term low code by ourselves and by press and sometimes customers almost assumes that we're removing the value away from what we do, and I think it's just doing nothing than adding value.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's a great point, because it's almost it's the hard PhD programmer that is deep in coding down in binary or assembly that would dismiss a low code or potentially talk about it without as much swagger. But the time to value, I mean, I guess from one aspect, every time you do these abstraction layers, there's a loss of fidelity. Let's say the early FileMaker Go. You could make a mobile app very quickly, but you didn't have the type of fine tuning if you did Xcode and really, but it took so much longer to do that. But that fidelity over time, and especially as this population gets into low code, that fidelity diminishes. And I think we're seeing that happen too, where a low code platform can really provide 99.9% of what you would need, especially in a business context where those needs really become value based.
Yeah, and I think
that might be a good place to actually ask a question. So one thing that Garrett talked about earlier was this real estate in between things. So it would kind of imagine an imaginary landscape where over here on the no code thing, we've got literally either finished apps or drag and drop kind of tools. And over here in a high code environment, we've got things like frameworks and other sort of raw code abstractions that automate things or make it quicker to actually do it, but you're still essentially doing raw coding. What's happening to this real estate? I was intrigued there, but Taylor saying that this is kind of, it sounds like it's expanding to where unless you're doing hardcore DevOps or you're setting up infrastructure on the one side, and then on the other side, really getting down to cover things that maybe had been edge cases for it in the past that were left out. So where's this real estate going on sort of both sides, either climbing up into doing things that would have in the past been handled by your PhD programmer, and then trickling down to folks who maybe would have just been using a drag and drop business process automation tool or something. Where's that real estate going? Is it expanding right now or shrinking, or where's it headed?
Yeah, I know, to jump on that one really quick, I would say it's definitely expanding because that's where you see all the hype around citizen developers or citizen data scientists or citizen AI analysts. It's making the non-specialized people able to bring that type of coding environment. So 10 years from now, when you look at the population, I think there's going to be a much heavier swing to the general population that can all do this type of coding, and there'll still be that very kind of that niche for the high fidelity programming, that high end, that's not going away and it's not going to be replaced. It's always going to be necessary, and that's kind of the engine driving this technological growth. But we're going to see this exponential ability in companies to do all these different things, and I think that's because the pie is getting bigger and a bigger proportion is being put into the low code space.
Garrett, since you came up with the metaphor, I feel like I should put you on the hot seat about it. What's your take?
Sure. I think, really it comes from understanding that a system does, we've come from a situation, right, where from a technical perspective, and some of the folks on the call have said this, you used to have to be handed an IT system. That was it. That was all you got. Now with the ability for folks to build it and the realization that a system doesn't have to have 1 million users, 1,000 users to be successful. A system has the capability to address some key processes and save hundreds of man hours a day or a week or a month through just automating and workflowing some minor processes. So I think as folks have come to realize, and in our daily lives, as we use virtual assistants and those sorts of things, we've come to understand that data is a currency. And if you can unlock that currency, you can really make a lot of value at it. And it doesn't just exist at the top level of an organization, it can exist in all areas and facets. And I think that's where that's the real estate low code resides.
Great. Did anyone else want to tackle that? Brad, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to your question, this continuum from no code to low code to pro code, I think was the way you were setting it up. There's that there's to me something very natural about the relationship between low code and pro code that fits into businesses, in organizations. In other words, if you have requirements that once developed as a software solution can be iterated, adapted, improved, they will become a hardened part of the architecture and infrastructure of the organization, then I think a low code platform that thinks about single sign-on just as one simple example that make a lot of sense for those organizations. At the other extreme in no code, it certainly invites usability and participation by more citizen developers and new citizen developers. But I like the low code space in that it understands the relationship between the business, central IT, the value of each organization, and can put together an architecture and a target architecture that accommodates both. So.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a good, how this fits into business brings up another question that I had, which is, how does the use of low code vary with the size of business? Brad, you just mentioned, companies will have a central IT department, but you look at a lot of small businesses and you walk in, you ask, who's the IT person here? And the owner is going to look around and go, I guess it's me. And so I'm wondering, if you all could talk about, you see tons of different sizes of businesses across the people you work with. How does this look different, across the spectrum of business size, from a large business that maybe has an IT department of thousands of people to maybe an SMB that is literally just sort of stitched a stack together and is looking at, hey, maybe I can make a custom tool pulling together 3 or 4 things that I'm already using.
I'm happy to jump. I didn't know if the question was directed at me or out.
Yeah, well, we'll start with you, but then I'd like to make sure that we hit everybody else too, because we've got a great, between Garrett at Booz Allen, and Jordan and Taylor, we've got a good mix of size.
Yeah, no, I'll quickly defer to them. We build a horizontal platform. We account for small and mid-sized businesses, large organizations. We're in, a huge percentage of the Fortune 500. We see a lot of participation right now in areas of education and healthcare. But I think to Garrett's point, there is return on investment with low code because the investment size is relatively low. Right? It is. And in many cases, the value unlocked by making that investment is returned in some multiple, significantly above and beyond what any of us would have expected as or projected as that initial return. So anyway, we see it everywhere, but these guys are living it.
Yeah. I know from my experience, it's always something I consider the secret weapon. And the first time I started using it, it was shadow IT, and so FileMaker would usually make its inroads as a shadow IT, which is those real technical people, non-IT, making solutions happen, and typically being resisted by IT and having to be fought down. And so as a CIO, I really embraced that and wanted to evangelize and have more citizen developers. But what I've also noticed, in a larger organization is, they go through the ERP space, whether it's SAP or Oracle or Microsoft Dynamics. And we're going through that right now. And there's a place for it. But back in the, years ago, I guess I'd start with saying no ERP will ever do 100% of what the business needs. And, everyone that's experienced it realized that. But the cost to go outside of the ERP and to customize was usually so prohibitive and great that you'd want to make the ERP layer as big as possible and that customization layer as small as possible, So you get these ERP companies building more and more, extensions, industry-specific add-ons and things like that were part of the core ERP DNA. And now I think it's hit an important inflection point where the ability to use APIs and connect into those ERPs, that the thinking, I think there's a strong argument to be made as saying you actually want the ERP to do as minimal as possible, and have that be the book of record that does order to cash, procure to pay, rec to check, all of those things, very solid and structured and non-changing. And then that custom layer with low code and open APIs allows you to build and customize and enhance workforce productivity in all sorts of areas to really evangelize and make better that workforce, and yet still have a very consistent, solid, accountable book of record.
Yeah, I think Stephen, to answer that question, to pick up of what Taylor said, where is this being used? Where is it going to be used going forward? I think the answer is, as we all know, we all see, is everywhere by everybody for a myriad of different reasons. I think to slightly generalize our experience of the Claris platform and the low-code space is the majority of people predominantly see big enterprise organizations as big Goliaths of oil tankers, which are all pulling in one direction. And at an exec level, that is what's happening inside these organizations. But the reality is underneath the surface, in most organizations, that they're acting as hundreds or thousands of small to medium-sized businesses inside one umbrella. And Taylor, as you were saying, that the big Goliath of the oil tanker is governed and managed by ERPs, CRMs, PLM systems, and they're designed to make sure that oil tanker is heading in the right direction. Where this space we can see is booming inside enterprise businesses is those tactical point-to-point solutions to solve a work group's team inside that larger organization, because the ERP system is never going to be designed, no matter how much the ERP or CRM or PLM vendors try to, there just isn't that penetration to build that mass market solution for those small teams inside enterprise, because their processes are so bespoke, and that's our value that we bring as business analysts, consultants, and as developers. On the opposite spectrum, you've got the small and medium-sized businesses who want to eventually be the large businesses. So they're almost pushing the technology far beyond what enterprise is trying to do at that work group level, because they're trying to push the boundaries so that they can become the medium-sized business. They're going to want to use the Claris Connect. They want to take advantage of machine learning and AI because it is now tangible to them, while the larger organizations are still trying to work out how they do that across 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 members of staff. So that's why it's a tough question to answer, is, well, where would it be applicable? I think it's probably a short answer to say where it wouldn't be applicable. But I think different businesses for different reasons, for different sizes, all depends on the workflow and the complexity of the business.
Got it. And, maybe Garrett, if you could touch on that from the big business side. And then Brad, I'd love to hear you actually talk about the reaction to Claris Connect among small businesses, because that's an area where, you definitely see businesses say, hey, I can go out and start a business and just pull in various different SaaS apps with the swipe of the credit card. But first, Garrett, wondering if you can talk about what you see in the real big side, if there's anything else to add there.
Yeah, I think there's two primary areas. One is, as Stephen and Taylor and Jordan had mentioned, supplementary systems. So supplementing an ERP system. You have a huge system with a ton of data, but it's focused at that top level. So being able to supplement that with workflows, controls, data capture that exist at a lower level inside of the organization. And I think the other one, quite honestly, is prototyping. I've seen a lot of systems, new stuff be built in a low-code system because it's quick to deploy. You can get a look at it. You can get your feet wet inside of the idea of using that. And when the time is right, perhaps there's opportunity or the desire to go to a more high-code system. So that's something as well that's a huge benefit of low code because it provides that quick turnaround and puts the control in, a lot of business folks' hands.
Great. And then Brad, just wanted to hear your take on small business, especially, since we're in such a unique time for small business in technology where a lot of folks have kind of taken it all in-house. So anything interesting there?
Yeah, it's clear with the small businesses that they are deploying almost exclusively cloud services. That's what they turn to. They don't have IT standards or any reason not to do that, and it's quick, easy, affordable, predictable. Therefore, they have integration challenges. What has been, Claris Connect is relatively new to the market, but what has jumped out is the massive returns massive return on investment we've heard from some of these small businesses where so many of their efforts are significantly manual, and just being able to automate those flows and put a really tight API driven integration in place, automate something that was done manually for as long as it had existed. And so, for those small organizations to find that big productivity lift in short order is pretty exciting. So I paying close attention and looking forward to new learnings from the SMB market, but I'm optimistic for what we can do there.
Great. Well, we're coming close to our closing time here. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to make sure we got in at least a few questions from the audience. So let me grab a few here. One that would be good is there a downside to the idea of low code where while it can lead to easily creating new things, it can also make it easier to create bad things as well? So for example, just because you have a great camera or a snazzy camera, as I can tell you with the newest phones that I have, it doesn't make me any better a photographer, no matter how good things look at the keynote. So, is there a danger that you can also create crummy things that will be deployed very quickly and then sort of stick around and be very hard to get out of there?
I would say absolutely. It's kind of that old, what was Bill Gates' quote? It was, automating a bad process just makes the bad process worse. It's definitely has that risk. I wouldn't say it's probably not a risk, but it's a challenge because as an IT leader, when you talk to the business and essentially can say, we can build whatever we want to build. It's not a question of capability. The question is, what do we want to do? That sparks a lot of productive conversations. And I think that's a key thing to overcome that idea of just running, without boundaries and trying to automate everything may not be optimal for the business. Having that tie to value is key.
Great. We've only got a few minutes left here, so I wanted to make sure we get to this question. So it seems we're moving into an era of democratizing digital transformation. Do you think we're going to face a huge skill shortage in the low code space as well? And if yes, are there any thoughts on how to tackle this? So in other words, low code emerged because of this huge gap between the need and the supply. But is that same problem going to arrive in low code, and how do you tackle it? Jordan, I'll let you go first on that one.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. I think the answer is that like anything, once there is a boom, there is a huge amount of demand, and then supply has to somehow keep pace with that demand. The low code space is, as multiple people have said, we can use the terms interchangeably between no code and low code and pro code, and the reality is what we do changes inside those three terms almost hour by hour on a daily basis. So I think what will happen is people will get more used to the easier end of low code. They'll come in at the starting point and they'll get to grips with the easy side, and as we saw with potentially what's coming next, you may be able to create a simple form, and that will empower end users. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're capable of turning into all of the advanced features of low code and moving more into the pro code space. So I think the term low code is a lot more inviting to people to come and try and come and take a look at what a career in coding would be. And we all know the majority of Claris developers didn't start out to be software developers. It's a creative space, it's a creative industry, we have a creative community, and most people have come to this because they wanted to solve a problem. And then they've fallen in love with the ability to solve problems quickly and help others by doing it on a daily basis. I think by focusing on that term low code, it's a lot more inviting than if I tell people I'm a developer, they have a picture of the Matrix up, that I sit in a dark room and I look at a green screen with code moving very quickly. And when we get interns and we get people to join us for a week, and they're actually saying, well, actually you spend most of the day just talking to customers about their problems and brainstorming, and our point is, yes, that's part and parcel of what we do. That's the majority of what we do. The code is just a byproduct of how we solve the solution. I think it's reiterating that message to get people into the industry who aren't conventional, and I'm being slightly generalistic here, aren't the conventional developers, or they're more the creative minded individuals who want to brainstorm and problem solve. But it is a challenge, and I think it'd be wrong of anybody to say that it's not a challenge, like anything in a boom.
Great. Well, thank you, Jordan, for that one. I appreciate it, and I want to thank all of our panelists, Jordan Watson, Garrett Reedy, Taylor Erickson, and then Brad Freitag from Claris. And I want to hand it back over to Brad. We're your last panel of the day. If this was an in-person event, we'd be the last thing between you and the bar. And the networking event, things are a little different virtually, so I want to pass to Brad to have some final words with you, and thank everybody for watching along with us.
Stephen, thanks so much. Great doing this panel with you. Appreciate you moderating, and a huge thanks to the panelists. A few points. We do have the closing session coming up, so I would encourage everybody, please tune in, learn about our award winners, and some tidbits on what's coming up in the future. Second point, and a bit of a follow-on to your last question, Stephen, about the scarcity of low-code developers, which I think there definitely are and will continue to be, and that is a nod to Claris Academy, where we're going to be posting all of this content, including this session, in the next couple of days. So please tune in there. Before my final comment, for those on auto enter, I want to make sure they know I'm in uniform. I've seen a lot of questions about that for everybody, so I am in code. And I think finally, huge thanks to the community, the participants in so many of these sessions. This has been incredible. It as satisfying as it is to have this virtual participation, it's an engaging me in a very different way than I expected, and certainly exceeding all of my expectations. It reminds me how much I look forward to being with everybody in person for whatever the next event is when we're able to do that. I know I personally cannot wait. So a deep felt thank you to all of you from the community who contributed, in addition to huge thanks to our own employees who put together a Herculean effort to pull off this event. So with that, signing off until the closing session. Thanks so much.
Thank you.